So, you ended up in Bel Rev Penitentiary. What'd you do to wind up in the prison for the worst of the worst? Attempted assassination of Superman? Large-scale attack on Central City? Whatever. We've seen it before. Here at Bel Rev, you're not a threat. You're just a prisoner. A number. Or at least, most of you are. Some of you are useful. Some of you will be forced to risk your lives on missions that could only be described as fool's errands for the chance to shave a few years off of your sentence. It's called Task Force X, and officially, it doesn't exist. Welcome to the Suicide Squad. I owed Amanda Waller a favor. Never a fun situation to find yourself in, but as an interdimensional traveler, observer, and analyst, she wanted me to take a look at her pet project, the Suicide Squad. Apparently the most recent mission left some of the members rattled, so she wants full psychological workups of the squad to see who all's ready to go back into the field. So I set out studying, researching, and figuring out what was up, and the first thing I realized is that Task Force X has earned the nickname Suicide Squad for a reason. On their very first mission, they were sent to a football stadium to contain an active cyborg zombie uprising. These are dangerous missions. Occupational hazards of this job include being shot, having your head blown off, being killed by your own teammates, getting sent to Arkham Asylum, nearly starving to death, being eaten by a shark, getting dragged through a portal to hell, getting brainwashed by a terrorist organization, having a dead lunatic's face taped over your own so his psychotic ex-girlfriend can have a heart-to-heart about his emotional abuse, being pushed into an interdimensional trash compactor, having a mountain dropped on you, being banished to the Phantom Zone, killed by an alien god, life or death battle with a trained killing machine, exposure to Joker toxin, tortured by a League of Assassins Splinter Cell, disintegrated by a time bomb, and much, much more. From 2011 to now, there have been 69 members of the Suicide Squad, and 33 of them have died, with some members dying multiple times, making for a grand total of 36 deaths across 69 people. This gives Task Force X a higher mortality rate than the current most dangerous job in America, the logging industry. They have a higher mortality rate than being an American slave. In fact, it over doubles the mortality rate of World War II, the single bloodiest event in human history. The next big problem I found was actually the basis of the squad itself. These are criminals. Not to stereotype, but most criminals aren't exactly the most well-rounded and mentally stable people. Psychological resilience is the measure of how quickly someone can bounce back from tragedy. Think of it like a psychological immune system. Imagine if someone close to you suddenly died. You would definitely grieve for a while, and that would be appropriate, but most of us would eventually get past it, moving on with our lives. But someone with a low resilience would likely be fighting that grief for much longer. High resilience means you deal with stress more effectively and bounce back from hard times faster. Low resilience means you're easily buried by stress and may take weeks or even months to be okay after a crisis. The problem is most criminals have really low resilience. It's part of why they become criminals in the first place. The stress of day-to-day life pushes them harder and harder until they snap and rob a bank or attack someone that upsets them. They don't have a good way of dealing with their stress. And most members of the Suicide Squad show all the marks of low resilience. Anger issues, poor interpersonal skills, pessimism, these are all things commonly found in individuals with a low resilience score. But you can't really blame them. Resilience is associated with what we call locus of control. Basically the question of, are you a victim of your circumstances or an active player in your life? Internal locus of control means that my destiny lies with me. I can do whatever I want, and where I am now is just a starting point. External locus of control means that I can only follow the path that life has laid out for me. There's no way to grow beyond that. I'm trapped, controlled by something else. Just like the Suicide Squad. Not only are they in prison where activities, visitors, food, and just about everything else is decided for them, but they're being controlled in another way, the nanite bombs. Or did you forget that every member of the squad is outfitted with a bomb at the base of their neck that will kill them if they ever step out of line? Their every action is being controlled. They have no power over their own lives, and anyone who tries to fight back is punished for it. But at this point, I noticed something strange. Despite all of these factors, the constant risk, the criminal background, and the absolute loss of control, the squad members are actually growing. They're becoming better adapted and just overall better people. Harley Quinn's time during the squad was right after her relationship with the Joker, and it was basically a giant therapy session that helped her get past that abusive relationship. The Reverse Flash is another example. Despite being a hardcore villain, he actually gets to die a hero's death as he powers through a blown-out knee to save an entire town full of children. A death that even Barry Allen is proud of. Recently, the squad was joined by a group of activists called the Revolutionaries, and with their help, they actually managed to escape and do good for the world. Deadshot lost his life in a fight against the Black Mask, saving other people. So what's going on? I mean, this is not a good situation to be stuck in. So how is it that these death row inmates are actually becoming more heroic and more resilient through their suicide missions? In the book No Visible Bruises, Rachel Louise Snyder discusses the horrific, terrifying, and downright disgusting world of domestic abuse. She goes over risk factors, common elements to help identify it, ways to help, and even the stories of reformed abusers. And what we find is that the circumstances of the Suicide Squad start to look pretty familiar. Now, I want to pause here to emphasize that I am not trying to lessen, joke about, or make light of this topic. Abuse is very serious, and despite the fact that I'm talking about it through the lens of a fictional comic book series, I understand the effect it has in the real world, and I hope to use this discussion as a way to shed light on something that I think a lot of us would rather just not acknowledge. There's contact info in the description of the video if you suspect any form of abuse in the lives of your friends, neighbors, or loved ones. I generally like to keep things upbeat on this channel, but if you have reason to believe that someone close to you is unsafe in their own home, please alert the proper authorities. It's better for you to call and be wrong than be right and find out too late. So, back to the squad. Let's start by pointing out some of the obvious similarities. The National Domestic Abuse Hotline lists 12 signs of an abusive and unsafe home, and they recommend that if even one of these is present, you should do everything you can to get away because your life is at risk. And I was able to find at least 6 of these behaviors from leader of the squad, Amanda Waller. Possibly 7 depending on how strictly you define drugs. And sure, maybe we could explain away 1 or 2 by extraneous circumstances, but 7? We see her threatening their lives, belittling them, keeping their loved ones from them. It's cruel and often entirely undeserved. There's also behaviors we see in the squad members that reflect this. During one mission, when things were falling and it looked like the squad was going to be decommissioned, Waller gave them explicit permission to leave, and not a single one did. Sure, they gave their reasons for it. Harley was bored, Deadshot wanted a favor, but what about earlier, when the squad had lost all contact with Waller and could essentially do whatever they wanted without her knowing? They decided to continue the mission. Why? Because she would find out if they didn't. This is textbook behavior for victims of abuse, who often, even when given the option to leave, just won't. It's not Stockholm Syndrome, it's fear. Fear that the abuser will change their mind and hunt them down to hurt them, or worse, hurt their loved ones, their children. Coincidentally, this is a fear that Deadshot shares, that if he rebels, Waller could target his daughter. Even the total loss of control that squad members have to face aligns itself with this idea. See, abuse is about control. It's a way of retaliating against a world that's beaten you down, exerting as much control as you can in one place to make up for lack of it in others. So control tactics are ways that an abuser will try to assume total power over their victim's life. Finances, friends and family, when you're allowed to leave the house and where you're allowed to go with who, all of these are control tactics. It's a way of making it less likely that a victim can get help. It's hard to run away when the person you're running from controls your money, and the only people you have contact with will likely take the abuser's side. squad has absolutely no control over their lives by design. It's to keep them weak. Now at this point, some of you might be saying that this is necessary. These are death row inmates. This is the only option. And I hear your point, but let me caution you here, viewer. That is a really dangerous outcome. In his book, The Lucifer Effect, Dr. Philip Zimbardo, famous for the horrific Stanford prison experiment, tries to find the root cause of evil against others. How can good people do bad things to other people? Dehumanization. Think about it. During the Holocaust, the Jews weren't people, they were vermin. During American slavery, the slaves weren't fellow citizens, they were property. It's okay to hit a disobedient wife because you own her anyway. You probably haven't realized it, but I haven't referred to a single prisoner by their real name this entire video. Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, Bloodsport, those aren't names. They're reminders that these are criminals. Don't see them as people, see them as the worst that society has to offer. Which brings us back to that problem. That glitch that just doesn't make sense. How are they growing through these dehumanizing experiences? Remember how abusers try to exert complete control over their victims? One of the consequences of this, or one of the reasons, is that it prevents the victim from having any kind of meaningful connection with other people. The kind of connections that we see the squad forming out in the field. It is statistically shown that an abuse victim is more likely to walk away if she has friends who support her and stand by her. And it's not a coincidence that during the storyline where we see the squad take control of their destinies and leave Waller behind, it's because they befriended the revolutionaries, a group that treats each other like family. It's almost like our relationships with other people make us more resilient. Because it's true. There are studies showing this, a high correlation between resilience and support from others. Because they see you, not as a victim or as property, but as a person. And they show you that you're not defined by the bad things that have happened to you. You're more than that. There are people who escape abusive situations. Survivors who make their abuse a footnote in their story rather than the end. We do not have to be defined by the people who hurt us or the bad things that happen to us. And if a group of death row inmates can forge friendships in the hell that is Bel Rev, if these psychos, lunatics, and murderers can go through everything they've gone through and still bounce back, so can we. It just takes a little bit of friendship. This is Singularity, and remember to stay curious.